What scientific fact scares the crap out of you? Story 1. Scientific literature's conclusion on Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases, in general, is that the diseases start decades before the first obvious symptoms, and that we need to treat them at this stage. When you exhibit obvious symptoms, it's too late. Your brain is already mush. If you get diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 65, you've had the disease since your early 40s at the least, and you experienced very mild symptoms but didn't notice them, and your brain fought like hell to compensate for the deficit. When you get diagnosed, your brain is already very severely damaged and will never recover from the deficit. There is nothing more scary to me than Alzheimer's, probably one of the worst ways to go in my mind. Forgetting who you are, who your family is, losing your ability to function independently, it's one of the scariest thoughts to me. I would rather get cancer than go through Alzheimer's. My paternal grandmother died from Alzheimer's in her 70s. I'm about to turn 34 and I've recently found myself forgetting simple words only to remember them later. I'm so terribly afraid Alzheimer's is already in me, wreaking havoc. The possibility of getting a disease that gets worse over time, but that you can't know you have until too late, truly is frightening. Hopefully in the future we'll have a way to screen for it very early on and maybe prevent or slow progress. Story 2. The Carrington Event. There was an event in the 1800s caused by solar activity where telegraphs operated on their own without power, and I think caused minor damage. Should such a solar event happen again, it would destroy all of our internet network capabilities and other electrical gear. I would be interested to know if we would be as badly affected as people initially thought. A couple decades ago, sure, technology was extremely fragile, and slight power fluctuations would fry everything. But these days, I don't know if that's still the case. Bearing in mind that the bulk of these issues would come from the main power grids and telephone lines, picking up voltage differentials over massive distances, most comms these days use fiber rather than copper, so that is not as big of an issue. A lot of tech these days is also power filtered or runs via an isolated transformer that would likely pop first before toasting everything else. Smaller devices like phones and laptops are likely to be big enough to have enough voltage variance across them to cause any real damage. There would be disruption, sure, but I don't think it would be as cataclysmic as people used to think it would be. I would say it would be a disaster rather than a mere disruption, but definitely not cataclysmic. Modern electric grids in most countries have multiple redundancies to prevent any single thing from frying everything, but those safeguards all going off at once will take a significant amount of money and manpower to repair, and many will be crap out of luck until they are. Always keep 3 months of food and a way to make potable water on hand, people. You're one solar flare away from being stuck in the 17th century for a few weeks. I know the idea of living without electricity and technology for any extended period of time is extremely scary for a lot of people nowadays. I do believe it would be a disaster in some places that aren't prepared to live without it, but maybe it would also encourage us to get back to our survival roots as a species. Story 3. The fact that we can just get a blood clot and die and not realize anything was up. The human body has so many ways of just suddenly dying, and it's terrifying. When my friend started studying medicine, she said she's surprised we're not dead yet, because she's constantly learning about so many ways and things that can kill people so easily. I've backed out on a lot of fist fights as I've gotten older. I've also stopped going out to bars and getting wasted. My reasons are that I've got a good job, and if I get arrested, I'll lose that and be unhireable in my field. My family had a friend of a family friend who punched a guy outside of a bar in our city and knocked him backwards. He hit his head on the ground and died on the spot. The guy he punched had wealthy parents and he got sued into oblivion on top of a 15-year sentence. His life is effectively over. My point is, a mild bonk on the head can kill you instantly. Be the bigger man. Unless it's self-defense, walk away. Don't risk your life or your career over words, because while the body can recover from some remarkable injuries, the littlest thing can kill you like that. I think we're all subtly aware of how fragile life really is, especially when we hear stories of people dying suddenly in ways that couldn't have been foreseen. This is one of those things that's best not to think about too much. Story 4. You can get non-buoyant water. I copied this comment from a post a while back and it freaks me out. In wastewater treatment plants, they aerate the water so the bacteria breaking down the poo has plenty of oxygen. Due to the introduced air, the water density is low enough that a human body or most any object that would normally float will go straight to the bottom. Holy crap, that is scary. Note to self, no swimming in wastewater treatment plants. More oxygen in water equals no oxygen for you. Is life really worth living if you will never experience the pure joy of swimming in raw sewage? Story 5. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It's genetic. You won't know that you have it. When you know that you have it, there is zero recourse. It will eat holes in your brain and you'll die. That and fatal familial insomnia, also genetic. One of your parents woke up one day and couldn't fall back asleep until they died, having suffered rapidly progressing neural degeneration, and it tends to set in around midlife, so you spend every day waking up knowing it might be the last time. You find it hard to build relationships and have a family because you know it's not a matter of if, only when. But you know you're not gonna see your golden years. Only about 5 to 15% of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease cases are related to inherited genetic mutation of prion protein. Fatal familial insomnia and Gerstmann-Straussler-Shankar syndrome, 85% of cases are sporadic. That is, it's just random bad luck that one of your prion proteins misfolded and then it goes from there, which to be honest is much scarier because it can happen to anyone. I had a family member get the sporadic version. We didn't even know she was sick until one day she was, and then it was very quick and truly, utterly, gut-wrenchingly horrible. Story 6. The metaphysical aspect of consciousness. Where is consciousness? What is it? When does it really end? Where does it go when we die or when we sleep? How does it occupy our entire being without being physically present? We are quite literally the universe experiencing itself in a fragile little bubble on a mote of dust in a sunbeam. And yet, what exactly are we? That's the sort of question that keeps me up at night. I don't fear death. I don't fear world annihilation, but I am deeply unsettled by the mere experience of being aware. Are you aware, though? You feel aware, but that feeling of awareness itself could simply be a byproduct of random convergence. You remember being a child, going to school, and growing up, but it's entirely possible that none of that has ever happened and that all your memories of having been or being now are simply a result of a chemical necessary to produce the effect, randomly converging in a gas giant or a nebula out in space, and in the next second that configuration will cease to be, and poof, everything that you were, are, and ever would be is no longer a thing. Even if we consider it true that you really are a meat monster walking around on a rock hurtling through space, the result of millions of years of evolution, it's still likely the result of random convergence. Billions of years existed before you were around to experience things, and billions more will exist long after you're gone. You exist for a half of a fraction of a picosecond so far as the universe is concerned. Given that timeline, it may have taken billions of years for your consciousness to coalesce, or it may have happened hundreds, thousands, millions of times so far, and every time you sit around anxiously thinking about thinking, only to die and be reborn sometime billions of years later just to do it all over again. I was fine until I read this comment. Now I'm waiting for my bus, wondering if I'm actually waiting for my bus, or if I just think I am. You got me knotted up over this. Story 7. Every time you use an antibiotic, even for something mild like strep throat or bronchitis or traveler's diarrhea, you technically could get a C. difficile infection from your wiped out gut flora, and that could end up a lingering resistant infection that leads to a colectomy or fecal transplant. Antibiotics are scary, and there's a reason doctors only want to prescribe them if absolutely necessary. This is one of the things that's been terrifying as I've gotten older. My doctor growing up used to pass them out like candy. I changed doctors and called in for antibiotics, and she was like, "No, give it time, you'll get better," and I was shook. Yeah, the thing is that doctors should be reluctant to prescribe them, but a lot of times they aren't. I've been offered antibiotics for flimsy reasons a couple of times, and it's always raised alarm bells. I was aware that the more we use antibiotics, the more resistant we become to them, but I had no clue you could develop an entirely different infectious disease as a result of taking them. That seems wholly counterproductive to their intended purpose. Story 8. This is less scary and more mind-numbingly depressing, but the dark era of the universe, when all the star fuel is gone, and it will be, and all the white dwarfs have gone cold and dark, and they will, and all the black holes have evaporated away into elementary particles, and they will, the universe will be a cold, dark place forever. If you want an ounce of hope, look into Roger Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology. It posits that if matter decays, there will be no matter left in the universe in the extraordinarily far future. Without mass, there is no distance between things, because time is distance. Time is the difference between distance and space. Space and time will then end, because without distance there is no space, and without space there is no time, and all that's left is energy. Without space and time, everything is everywhere all at once, similar to the conditions of the Big Bang. A small quantum fluctuation later, and we get another Big Bang. I choose to believe in CCC because I would hate spending an absolute eternity in oblivion because everything's dead forever. CCC also makes a lot of sense to me. There are cycles to everything. Why not a cycle to the universe too? Story 9. Your eyes have their own immune system, and if your brain ever figured that out, it would eat away at them, turning you blind. Wait, what? Uveitis, an autoimmune disorder or disease where the immune system attacks healthy body tissue, in this case, the eyes. Story 10. The Pacific Northwest has a 600-mile-long subduction zone that is approximately 70 years overdue for a 8.8 to 9.2 magnitude earthquake, and nothing on that coast is built to withstand that. There hasn't been a strong earthquake on that coastline since European contact, because the last major earthquake happened in 1700. Unlike Japan, which had a comparable earthquake in 2011, the PNW isn't ready for it, and things aren't built to withstand what's coming. Someday soon, Seattle, Vancouver, Portland, and Victoria are all going to lurch 6 feet inland, shake violently for 5 to 7 minutes, and then get hit with a 100-foot-tall tsunami. It is projected to kill tens of thousands, displace millions, wipe out trillions of dollars of wealth, the second largest humanitarian disaster in North American history, second only to Haiti, and it seems like people are just pretending this doesn't exist. To be fair, I know all too well that this exists. It's just that all I can do is know what to do when my house is rubble, and there won't be power, water, or food for weeks. Knowledge of what to do after an event is much more important than expecting the event. Pretty much, there's not much you can do to prepare for such a catastrophic event on a personal level. Stock food and water? Sure, but how do you know you'll be able to get it when the shaking stops? Safe house outside the area? How do you know the roads or your vehicle will be usable? Pretty much the best thing you can do is prepare yourself, get first aid training, search and rescue training, or advanced first aid if you can, and just be ready. When it hits, you won't be prepared. Any material possessions you have will likely be gone or inaccessible. Have a first aid kit with some outdoor survival gear in your car and your home. Be ready to help your neighbors survive the first few nights, and pray to whatever deity you worship that help arrives quickly, because you won't be able to rely on any resources, hospitals, or infrastructure there to be even remotely usable. Story 11. That viruses cannot classify as a living organism and yet behave as if they are fully aware of their surroundings and evolved to suit it. They behave like they have a brain but are merely nucleic acids. They have fascinated me since my first virology class. Viruses are software. They are not alive in any sense to me. I never understood why that's even controversial. Here's an analogy. You have a huge warehouse filled with advanced 3D printers. They can print all kinds of amazing things, including their own parts. Each one even has a cool robotic arm that allows them to take the parts it makes and use them to repair itself. You stick a thumb drive into its USB port, the printer reads the thumb drive's info, which contains the plans for printing more thumb drives with the same plans. So the 3D printer then prints a new thumb drive. Then it grabs the drives with its robotic arm and plugs it into the 3D printer next to it. The thumb drive is a virus. It does nothing. It makes nothing. It can't move on its own. It can't read or execute the code stored on it. This is a really good analogy. Thanks for that. It's even more crazy to me that a thing that's not even alive has this burning desire to keep creating more of itself and will do and go through anything to do so. It's also interesting to me that viruses can cause mutations in hosts. With the massive potential viruses have, maybe we should consider ourselves lucky we haven't had a Raccoon City incident yet. Story 12. The fact that scientists are telling us, screaming really, to make changes or stuff is going to get worse, and we just don't. Former professional scientist here, but not remotely a climate-related scientist other than working with people on some of the modeling code. But I know and am related to plenty of more topical scientists. The thing most people don't realize is that published work is really pretty conservative in predictions. There are lots of things which could and likely will happen, which are hard to impossible to model the full effects of. So we don't know when they might happen, which will cause things to get a lot worse very quickly. Most of the people I know think things will get catastrophically worse than the consensus predictions. I got my degree in climate science and noped the heck out of anything in the field because I couldn't stand to pretend we had any chance after learning about so many of the models. Story 13. Perception of reality is really just a simulation in your brain. Similarly, a dream, especially a lucid dream, can be as vivid, impactful, and profound as any waking moment in your life. For those that go into the deep end of lucid dreaming, the difference between waking life and dream becomes laughable. I had a dream that was distressing, and I woke up. Then I went back to sleep and the same dream started replaying. I realized I was on a replay and I knew that I was asleep, but I consciously decided to play it out again. I had a strategy in my head to make it better this time. It was surreal. My eyes were closed, I was in the dream, but I was also right there on the couch. I could feel my dog snoring and shifting next to me. I heard landscapers outside. In the dream, I was stressed. In real life, my heart was pounding and my breathing was shallow and I was scared. The dream got to a breaking point and I basically said, "Okay, enough," and woke up all the way. This was at the starting end of the most severe couple years of insomnia I've ever had. I had a couple lucid dreams before, but that one I can play the memory back like watching a video. Yeah, those replay loops are crazy. I remember one time I woke up and decided to get orange juice from the fridge and noticed it was gone. I didn't realize until later that my trusted memory of buying orange juice was just a recollection of a dream. Story 14. The uncanny valley. Even when done extremely well, humans have a trait that allows them to tell when an image or video of a person in front of them is not real. This is more prominently noticed now due to CGI and digital art, but according to studies, this triggers a mild fight-or-flight response to us. This implies that at some point in our evolutionary history, we evolved a trait to warn us if something looked human but wasn't. I've read some theories that this was due to other races like the Neanderthals, but considering we now know that early Homo sapiens actively crossbred with Neanderthals, that seems unlikely. It could be to identify diseased or dead individuals and avoid them. Possibly, perhaps even most likely, but it's funner to think it's something far creepier. Story 15. That the average core body temperature of the human body is slowly declining, and most believe as a result of global warming. It sounds fine until you realize that our body temp evolved just to be hot enough to avoid dangerous forms of bacteria, and more importantly fungi, from infecting us as perfect hosts. At that point, global warming will no longer be our biggest problem for the human race. I think OP is suggesting that the world from The Last of Us is potentially real and imminent. Story 16. That at any point, which can be very, very close to use due to general majority's mistreatment of waste medicines and antibiotics, fungi and bacteria might become resistant to the effects of antibiotics. And you know what? As of now, we don't have any way of dealing with them other than the said antibiotics, and any methods that won't harm living cells, which happen to be what we're made of. In other words, the most known and used non-antibiotic ways of dealing with fungi and bacteria are the ones that would harm us too. So yeah, even if the Last of Us fungus doesn't come around, a pandemic from a fungus or bacteria has a higher chance of being an apocalyptic event than one from a virus like COVID. Another concern is autoimmune syndrome. It's literally a biological coup. Your own defenders attacking you, and they still don't know exactly why it happens. It just happens. You might sleep totally healthily, and then the next morning you start to show symptoms of type 1 diabetes. Lastly, at any point, a supernova millions of light years away from us might eject a beam of gamma rays with impossibly high energy at us, and since those rays travel at the speed of light, by the time we realize what's coming, we'd be fried into our own atoms within a microsecond or so. Something to add on top of that is how we saw this society handled the adversity of COVID, which was really only a year and a half or so. Cooperation in times of adversity is not a human strength. Story 17. Aneurysms in general. My little sister, 16, died of one. She was playing volleyball for school and just dropped out of nowhere like 5 months ago. No warning signs, no sense of impending doom, nothing. She just dropped and was gone, like turning off a light switch. Apparently they're rare enough that she took the statistical hit for the whole family in a way, but knowing that something can end you just like that scares me. Story 18. Advanced alien life either exists and isn't capable of reaching our planet, and we aren't capable of reaching theirs, or exists and has reached our planet but is being hidden from the public as a whole for unknown reasons. Or it exists and has reached our planet but doesn't wish to make contact with us for fairly obvious reasons. Or it doesn't exist at all and we are alone and destroying the only planet that has life, such as ours. Also, there is a possibility that they exist and are planning an invasion, or worse, have already successfully invaded the planet and are currently enslaving us. I've heard of a theory which I don't remember the name of, but find it quite interesting. It was basically that if aliens came to our planet, at first we would probably perceive it as some type of movie alien invasion and be scared, and also maybe try to find them. In other words, we would automatically perceive them as enemies. So if we reach another planet's life someday, how can we know that they won't perceive us the same way? True, I always thought that if I were an alien with super advanced tech allowing me to reach a far-off world and observe the life of it, and I saw that life was busy inventing new ways to destroy itself while constantly trashing and destroying its own planet and arguing about who's in charge with a memory that only lasts 15 minutes, I'd be like, nope, no intelligent life here, folks. Time to move on and find another planet. Story 19. The fact that human medical advances might make it to the point of immortality, specifically dying of old age, being erased in our lifetime. Yeah, you're always going to run the chance of a truck hitting you or being in a home invasion gone wrong, but unfortunately Generations Z and Alpha are going to have to think of what they would want to do for eternity. Not the life I really want, to be honest. So everyone will have to work for eternity? Good news, only the rich will get to live forever. Don't worry, you're still going to die. Story 20. Mango worms. Larvae of mango flies. They lay their eggs on the ground, but if you happen to have skin contact with them, you become their nest. The eggs will stick to your skin, hatch, and the worms will crawl into your skin pores, where they just lay there and grow. They will grow until they become bumps on your skin, and you will not notice they're deeper in there. Seriously, at least maggots are polite enough to only live in dead bodies. Just reading this triggered my trypophobia. Story 21. There will come a time where the universe has expanded to a point where the distance between galaxies is too large for light to continue to travel between them. Any life in them will believe their galaxy is all there is, and will have no way to ever know of a larger universe. That's assuming the universe continues to expand. It could reach a point of expansion and then contract to a point of singularity, only to explode again. Wash, rinse, repeat. That's the most likely outcome according to experts. Based on our current understanding, we can expect a big yawn ending in heat death. Story 22. There are a lot of rocks whizzing out in space fast enough and large enough to end our species. Fortunately, space is really big. Unfortunately, there are a lot of candidates out there, and it only takes one. NASA routinely realizes that one can come a bit too close well before we could do anything about it. We could all wake up one day and the timer to extinction has started because of some random careless rock. Your life from that point on will be meaningless. Our entire history will cease to exist. A millennia of life will be gone, and you will just have to find a way to accept this is the end. Story 23. Our white blood cells are fighting cancer cells on the daily. If everyone lived forever, we would all eventually get cancer. Statistical fact. Your cells are just gonna split weird eventually and mutate. Well, they would have to mutate just the right way. They have random mutations pretty much every time they divide. But once a few very specific mutations come together, you have cancer. It's a little scary knowing that simply due to the nature of cancer, we would all get it if we lived long enough. Story 24. Rabies. You can have it and never know until it decides it's time, and then you'll die terribly. I mean, it's definitely terrifying to think about, but it's not exactly a disease that's hard to avoid. If you live in a developed country, and most developing countries to be honest, it's statistically almost impossible to catch it. And if you do get bitten by an animal, you can get vaccinated at literally any clinic or hospital the same day, and the vaccine is 100% effective. You almost have to go out of your way to die from rabies. A lot of people don't don't realize how ridiculously rare rabies in humans is in developed countries. Like, you are more likely to become a billionaire in the US than die or even contract the virus. Story 25. The Marianas Trench is so deep that you could fit a Mount Everest in it. Even if you stand at the summit, there would still be about a mile of ocean above your head. Honestly, this has always fascinated me. I've really been wanting to explore the deepest parts of our oceans, especially the trench, just to see what I find. And it doesn't scare me, but infuriates me that physics, as of now, prevents us from diving that deep. It sucks. I get it, I understand it, but darn it ticks me off. Yep, there are probably hundreds of species of ocean life we have yet to discover, not to mention how insanely titanic some of those creatures are. I know the science of their gigantism has already been explained, but to just witness them, the gigantic squid would be quite the study if we could find them. Scary as crap too. It's so frustrating having this vast amount of ocean we can explore right at our fingertips, yet we don't have the science to do it just yet. The vast unexplored nature of the ocean is a little scary to me, mostly because we don't know exactly what Leviathan awaits us in these depths that we can't explore. Nothing is scarier than the unknown. Story 26. That I'm 38 and this type of thinking leads you to very sudden scary things, but it's wildly more likely that the entire human race is going to slip into a state where it's extremely unpleasant to be alive within my lifetime. It's been a large deciding factor in me deciding that kids aren't for me. If I make it to 70, 32 years away, it's very likely life will be unpleasant. When I read the headline of this thread, I thought climate change would be somewhat like the top 5 answers, and I'm quite astonished it took so much scrolling to find it. I suppose I cheated a little bit by being vague. Climate is up there as the prime reason, and although we're told there is still a chance, which technically there might be, we're not set up politically to react. So I'm assuming we'll just drive ourselves into the ground. It seems like a very human thing to do. If humans survive, the history books will balk at how idiotic we were. Much like how we look back at Nazi Germany and say, why didn't average Germans do anything? If there are humans in 100 years looking back, I assume they'll also ask why average people didn't do anything. Story 27. The potential for false vacuum decay. It's possible that the vacuum state of our universe isn't really in its lowest state, but is instead in a false low. If something were to cause the vacuum to decay to its true minimum, where in the universe this would spread at the speed of light, and when it reached us we would simply cease to exist. No warning, no feeling, just gone. Scary conceptually, but not really a threat. At a universal scale, the speed of light is heartbreakingly slow, and most of the observable universe is expanding away from us faster than light. So unless this happened right on top of us, the wave front would also be moving away from us faster than it is expanding. You make a good point. Unless it was within our local group, it would never reach us as the universe expands. And if it was within our local group, we would long dead in a bubble of completely wrecked physics and rearranged chemistry that would make life such as us completely and utterly impossible. Story 28. If Einstein is right, all moments in time, past, present, and future, are equally valid, and it's only a limitation of consciousness that we're experiencing only the present. It also means that everything that has ever happened or ever will happen are all mapped out in some kind of temporal landscape, not so much mapped out as also occurring. Every possible eventuality is occurring in some version of the universe, but mathematically, realistically, you're happening right here, right now. Story 29. When we look up at the stars, we're not actually looking up into the heavens, but staring down an infinite abyss that the invisible force of gravity just happens to keep us from falling into. For some reason, this one bothers me the most. Yeah, it can make you feel a little sick if you're looking into the sky on a cloudless night in a place with little to no light pollution. No matter the time of day, looking up into the sky is almost always functionally staring into the gaping maw of eternity. Thanks, gravity, for preventing us from falling into the horrifyingly vast unknown. You're the best. Story 30. When presented with facts, contrary to one's opinions, humans tend to dig their heels deeper into their wrong opinions instead of admitting that they were wrong. While you raise an interesting point, and there are many reasons for this, it seems there are ways to avoid it too. Despite these obstacles, it is still possible to change other people's minds with some strategic persuasion skills. These include establishing common interests, framing perspectives in a positive light, and paying attention to their mental or emotional state. Many people argue their their positions from an adversarial standpoint, and then wonder why it doesn't work. You can't attack a person into adopting your position. Even if it is logically sound, people will put up defenses when they feel attacked. One of the most useful persuasion skills is empathy. You must understand why your opponent reached the conclusions they did, even if you still think they're wrong. As the quote attributed to Aristotle goes, "It is the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. No idea is completely disjointed from reality. You must understand where those anchors are, and if you want to properly argue against it, and what needs the people who adopted that position are seeking to fulfill by adopting it." Story 31. The technology to beam words into people's brains and to read people's brainwaves and transform them into images already exists. Mental privacy will be gone in our lifetime. I think I would go crazy if mind reading became commonplace in society. I'd be so focused on my thoughts and so paranoid of what I was going to think and if people would see. I don't think my fragile little head could handle that sort of mental invasion. It is something that keeps me up at night sometimes, but one day I won't be able to have those thoughts unless I want to be sent to a re-education camp. Story 32. The fact that, for all the science can tell, there is no divine punishment for the bad guys. Why would anyone want there to be? A dead person poses no threat to anyone anymore, cannot be rehabilitated, and can't serve as a deterrent since no one can see into any hypothetical afterlife. There's no point punishing them. In a sense, indeed, there is not. Yet if someone hurt your baby girl and always escaped justice, it would be nice to bring some responsibilities upon him, don't you think? Other than that, there is nothing that scares me. Not death, not the death of humanity or the death of Earth's life. So I had to come up with something. Story 33. Aging. The fact that our bodies just naturally deteriorate, becoming weaker and more prone to illness and injury. I'm approaching 40, and for the first time in my life, despite a lot of fitness hobbies, I'm starting to feel it. I have longer workout and injury recovery. Odd aches and pains, gray hair, interrupted sleep, and colds and flus kick my butt now. It's strange seeing a progressively older version of myself. I'm not scared of death, but aging becomes ever more unsettling as time goes on. It's the proverbial elephant in my mind. Thanks for watching till the end. If you have a similar story or concept that you would like to share, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel or choose one on the screen at the end of the video. Thanks again, and see you next time.